My name is Arthur Chung, a former member of the Catastrophic Phenomenon Task Force, and it is my hope that these videos aid someone in their survival during this, you might as well call it what it is, during the end of the world. After two incredibly tragic events that led to the loss of millions of lives, as well as the sinking of Puerto Rico, Haiti, as well as Japan, the world was met with the impossibility, with science fiction made fact. Two kaiju, and possibly large creatures that were thought to only be the work of science fiction, came into reality, came into existence. Somehow, some way, these creatures emerged into our world. Were they always there, or were they a product of something else? These are questions we may never know the answer to. But as I stated previously, these creatures were destroyed the moment that they made landfall, with the immediate and abruptly violent actions of a unified world government that seemed to have popped up overnight with the emergence of these creatures. And they were very different from one another. The kaiju that made landfall upon the west coast, that flooded the Californian coast and caused millions of lives to be lost in that instant as the waters completely consumed the coast. This impossibly large creature seemed to be encased in a almost gelatinous shell, which increased the durability of this creature as it made landfall, and its ability to absorb the force of bullets and explosions through this gelatinous membrane was something that we've never seen before. It was almost likened to that of a shield from science fiction. These impossible creatures are much more likened to that of writing and of imagination than of reality. Yet they stood before us, and we were in awe, in fear, in madness in what we saw. Distorted within the membrane was the form of what seemed to be a either cephalopod or mollusk-like life form, with enormous appendages that seemed to emerge from the very muck of this gelatinous shell. What little information received from witness reports from the former Catastrophic Phenomenon Task Force, individuals that came into contact with these appendages, these tentacles, would become infected. There were so many reports coming in, and it was hard to discern what was actually sheer mania and fear and what was truth and fact. But from the eyewitness statements that could be correlated, we came to the conclusion that these particular infected individuals would become vectors, a way for these appendages to reach out and gather more food. Affected subjects would seek out others, healthy individuals, to infect and continue to spread this infection throughout the populace that was within the areas that these appendages infiltrated. Over time, affected individuals would stop seeking others to infect, but would return to the appendage itself that affected them, and would be seen being digested by the gelatinous membrane that surrounded the tendril. What was also denoted were that there were physical changes in subjects that were infected. It would begin with an intense amount of sweating. It would seem that the sweat would eventually evolve into a mucus that would be secreted by the skin, and soon the skin itself would become slightly translucent. And it would be at the stage in which the infected individual would become translucent that they would stop seeking to infect others and return to the source and become digested. The kaiju that made landfall upon the Californian coast would be given the code name Thrall. Interestingly enough, Kaiju Thrall would be considered to be much larger than Kaiju Yong. And this was not only due to the gelatinous membrane that surrounded the main body of this creature. The size of this creature would include the incredibly long tendrils that it would emit and as it made landfall. And though both creatures were stopped before they were able to make their way further inland, it would take several days and millions of dollars worth of ordnance to be able to finally take down both of these kaiju. The loss of life in these events were unprecedented. And once again, the world would have to continue to face the loss of millions and millions of people in a matter of days. But the death of Kaiju Thrall did not end the spread of the unique disease that would be infecting the populace. It would be from the body of Kaiju Thrall that our world would get an introduction to some of the ecosystem that lived upon these impossibly large creatures. For what we thought was once a gelatinous membrane around the creature that was called Thrall was in fact a gigantic colonial organism that lived around that creature. And with the death of Thrall, these creatures would spread across California, separating into thousands of gelatinous creatures that were the stuff of nightmares. And each of these gelatinous organisms, these creatures which represented something of a siphonophore, it seemed each one of these creatures had their own form of venom. And this unique venom would be a mutagen that would allow for them to feed in a similar way to Kaiju Thrall itself. But the subjects infected by the venom of these creatures would all have different reactions, causing a multitude of new horrors to emerge. And